Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 700 Club. Well, if you weren't here yesterday, before we get into the news today, I just want to mention that I'm here alone because my dear friend and co-host, Dr. Pat, has taken a spill from his horse, the horse that he rides regularly and is passionate about, through him because of a rabbit that made an inappropriate appearance at the wrong time. And so Pat is recovering from some injuries that have him down for a little while, but I know this man, he's going to be back in short order. He's already healing, but do keep him in your prayers. And, you know, he loves that horse, loves the whole equestrian experience, and so we're wanting to see him back in the saddle again soon. Well, in the news today, North Korea has backed down from its threat to attack the American territory of Guam. President Trump had promised a response of fire and fury if the North attacked that island in the Western Pacific. But now the North Koreans say they're going to hold off. Dale Hurd brings us the story.
It appears that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has blinked first. North Korean media reports Kim has decided not to launch a missile attack on Guam. But the statement also warns that the communist dictator might change his mind if, quote, the Yankees persist in their extremely dangerous, reckless actions. It was welcome news to officials on Guam.
We're happy that the rhetoric is starting to calm down, perhaps, from Kim Jong-un in not at least pursuing at the moment his threats to fire missiles at Guam.
But at the same time, Pyongyang said North Korea's military Tuesday still presented Kim Jong-un with plans to launch missiles into waters near Guam and, quote, ring the windpipes of the Yankees. U.S. leaders had signaled Sunday that North Korea's threats to attack Guam were mostly bluster.
I've heard folks talking about we being on the cusp of a nuclear war. I've seen no intelligence that would indicate that we're in that place today.
Still, President Trump had warned the North that the U.S. military was locked and loaded, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs says his forces are ready.
And I can tell you there's two things that we're clear about. One, our responsibility to defend against an attack, and two, our requirement to make sure that we have a decisive response in the event of an attack.
And Defense Secretary James Mattis warned Monday that if North Korea fired a missile at the U.S., it could escalate into war very quickly. Experts say the North could be looking for a concession, such as a cancellation of planned U.S.-South Korean military drills set to begin Monday, which the North claims are rehearsals for invasion. It should be noted that North Korea backed away from its threat just hours after its ally China announced it would get on board with UN sanctions and ban imports of North Korean coal, iron, and seafood starting today. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thank you, Dale. Well, that's not an unexpected outcome, certainly a hoped-for outcome, and we all rejoice in that. Here at home, the man who drove a car into the crowd in Charlottesville Saturday could be facing federal charges. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Terry. Others could soon be facing federal charges, too. As national security correspondent Eric Rosales reports, the U.S. Attorney General's office is investigating the case as President Trump made a strong statement against white supremacist groups.
Some 48 hours after a man plowed his car into a crowd of counter-protesters at a white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, President Trump called out the hate groups from the White House.
Those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
The president's statements came after criticism from both sides of the aisle for not being strong enough Saturday in his first response to the violence. But after meeting with the Attorney General and FBI Director Monday, the president is promising justice. A civil rights investigation is underway and could bring federal charges against 20-year-old James Alex Fields Jr., who police say was behind the wheel of that Dodge Challenger. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions calls the attack evil and adds it meets the definition of domestic terrorism.
We are pursuing it in the Department of Justice in every way that we can make a case. You can be sure we will charge and advance the investigation toward the most serious charges that can be brought, because this is an unequivocally unacceptable and evil attack.
Those who have known Fields say they are not surprised.
He was vocal about his ideas, he proclaimed himself as a Nazi and as a white supremacist. It wasn't a secret.
Heather is my darling child who was taken from me.
Susan Bro, the mother of 32-year-old Heather Heyer, killed in the attack, says she's going to make her daughter's death worth something.
I am extremely proud of my daughter. I'm extremely proud that she stood for what she believed in, that she not only gave mouth to it, but she gave heart to it, she gave soul to it, and now she's given her life to it.
On the street where the attack took place, people brought flowers and wrote messages of hope. Meanwhile, the suspect awaits his next court date, August 25th. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Eric. It's a new medical breakthrough so controversial it's seen as both an answer to prayer and a potentially frightening perversion of the human race. Lori Johnson explains how editing human genes to get rid of sickness sounds like a great idea, but also raises serious concerns it could lead to a brave new world of designer babies.
Many of us know someone who inherited a gene that caused them to get a terrible disease like Alzheimer's or cancer. Now, scientists say they've developed a technique to get rid of those problem genes and therefore the diseases they cause. It's called gene editing. As the name suggests, scientists remove the bad gene and replace it with a healthy one. They did this in an Oregon lab by replacing a gene in a human embryo that caused a potentially deadly heart condition. The embryo was later destroyed. Scientists say gene editing will allow them to prevent a whole host of other inherited diseases, but some don't like the way the process is being tested.
Concern here is that what they did is effectively killed a number of embryos in order to get the genetic change that they want. And we believe that that could have been done later in the process to actually treat even an unborn child or a child with that disease.
Another worry is that this could lead to the creation of so-called designer babies, where scientists alter an embryo's genetics not to save a life or prevent a disease, but to make the person better looking, better in sports and school.
With this technology, we're talking about altering life and altering the germline heredity of people, and that creates a lot of concerns for us and a lot of other people.
Many in the scientific community share that concern. Scientists who gathered from around the world in Washington, D.C. last year said gene editing should only be used to save lives and alleviate suffering.
People start talking about eye color, hair color. Sometimes people start talking about things like memory enhancement or muscle mass and things like that. And I think we really need to be careful about that because, quite frankly, some of that involves very, very complicated science in terms of the numbers of genes that you'd have to manipulate, etc. And at least for now, that's not the game.
It's difficult to prevent those experiments from happening, but what you can do as a community is set clear guidelines about what would be an acceptable experiment and what would be an unacceptable experiment, and to not let those people that perform unacceptable biological experiments get away without some form of regulation or punishment.
So while gene editing is still in its infancy, now may be the ideal time to discuss all of the possible consequences of this new technology, as well as ways to control it. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thanks, Lori. Well, Terry, as Lori just said, this all seems to boil down to making sure that this technology is controlled and only used in the right circumstances.
Boy, John, talk about a whole new frontier. You know, I think Lori has hit the nail on the head. The time to discuss all the repercussions and ramifications of this, and those are just the ones that would be known at this point, is now, before we move forward with it. So, great report, fascinating, could hold a lot of promise, but certainly a lot of challenges.